talk to adults. Usually it's kids or younger people. So we'll start the best way I know how. I'll skip the stretches and jumping in place to wake everybody up. Pastor asked me today to speak for Mother's Day. So motherhood is like, it's full of challenges. It's full of funny stories. It's full of scary moments. When I was growing up as a kid, I never really truly understood the stress I put on my mother and my grandmothers who supported her often. One time when I was younger, I had a little Honda 70 dirt bike, little motorcycle. Loved it. It was my favorite. But I had rules. My mom had rules because she was definitely afraid of fatal injury. So I wasn't supposed to ride it whenever she wasn't home. So one day I had a friend who was over, and I thought, well, I'll show her how to ride it. I won't really be on the bike. I'll just show her how to ride it. So I put her on it, and she'd never rode one before, and she took off and she squeezed the grips, and the bike jumped forward, and she took off, and I'm like chasing after her, trying to tell her where the brake is, and it went right up into a tree, into the fork of a tree. So it was like, it landed like it was a small tree, and it was like a little fork, and it landed right in between the forks of the tree. And so my mom wasn't home. I'm like panicking because I'm not supposed to have it out. And so I do the only thing I know how to do, and I call my grandma. And I'm like, Grandma, because we couldn't get the tree out of we couldn't get the bike out of the tree because of all these little twigs and branches and stuff. So I called Grandma, and I'm like, can we borrow some pruners to get the tree, So my grandma comes down the road. She lives around the corner. She comes walking down the road with the pruners in one hand and a camera in the other hand. So she had evidence because she thought it was hilarious once she found out nobody was injured. But yeah, so motherhood is, and the thing is anybody would have drove by and seen us with that motorcycle in the tree in our yard. They would have immediately thought, my mom was, somebody wasn't watching us, so we were being neglectful. But in reality, my mom didn't know. I was breaking the rules. So, we put a lot of pressure on moms to do the right thing and to always do the best and to always get it right and to always, have it all under control and be perfect and everything. And, so a lot of moms, they don't know who to look up to sometimes, and they don't know where to go for help. And you have this whole culture now where everybody's quick to give advice, everybody's quick to judge, everybody's quick to ridicule. And we turn to experts and celebrities and different people to look for advice and get advice and everything. And you could, we have the whole new level now of social media where everybody's judging and making assumptions before you even know the story or what was going on behind the scenes, or before they even have the whole, before they even know. So lives, can be impacted by that. So, sorry, I lost my place. So mothers all around the country are having to deal with this, and they have insight on what's trending, and they try to follow and get advice and things like that. So people usually model their behaviors after people they admire or people they look up to. Most of the times it's celebrities or experts or people that they know that are popular, or friends and things like that. So when I was asked today to speak, I started looking through the Bible and looking to the scripture for mothers. And there's a lot of mothers that are in the Bible, and there's a lot of mothers who are really good mothers, and they're very inspirational women in the Bible who weren't just mothers, but they were also just women that were inspirational. But then there's also a lot of mothers that are problematic and mothers that were kind of evil. So when I looked for this, when I looked to see what to talk about today, really the only perfect person in the Bible that we need to be modeling after is Jesus. He was the only perfect person. And the prophets and the kings of the Old Testament, none of them were perfect. None of them were meant to be our example or our role model. Preachers, youth leaders, worship leaders today aren't really meant to be our role models. And if we if we follow them and put our faith in them, we're going to find out that we're going to get, over time, eventually somewhere along the way, we're going to be disappointed and disillusioned. So Jesus is the only perfect one, and he's our example. And it's nice to think about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and how she must have been this incredible woman to have been given the opportunity to raise Jesus, and how she must have been so wonderful. But at the same time, too, she was just a person like us, and she wasn't perfect. And you know, if you've ever been a mother who has turned around and your child is gone, you can sympathize with Mary, because at one point in time, she thought Jesus was in the crowd with the relatives doing what he's supposed to do, and then they find out he wasn't. They had to travel all the way back a day's journey to find him. So not even she was perfect, but so Jesus is our true role model. So Jesus is our example. He is the example for mothers and basically for everyone. The way he loved, corrected, and forgave, that should be the model for how we raise our own children and how we interact with the people around us. How much better would the world be today, and the state of the world and the situation, if everybody acted more like Jesus as best they could? The conversation Jesus had with the woman at the well was a beautiful conversation. If you go back and you look at it, and the things that he said and the way he pointed out, and there wasn't any judgment or anything that he kind of despite or anything in his voice, the tone, the way he handled her, it was it was a beautiful conversation. The way he talked with Zacchaeus was gentle and firm, and he took the time and he reached out to Zacchaeus when other people wouldn't have even given him the time of day. The woman that was brought to him to be condemned, he showed her compassion while causing her accusers to look back at themselves. He took the time to meet with Nicodemus, and he took the time to meet him and teach him about salvation. And I can only imagine how many times Jesus patiently repeated himself and explained himself for the disciples. And I'm sure Jesus was a superstar at the why questions and the but why questions. He cared about the children and the widows. He had compassion for the sick. He reached out to people from all areas of society. He had a heart for people. Jesus didn't seek fame, wealth, or power. All the things that he could have had, had that been his goal. But those weren't the things that he was here on earth for. He spent time with people. He taught and healed people. He didn't care what the religious leaders of the day thought. He was honest, he was brave in his actions, and he was caring. What makes Jesus our perfect role model is not only that he was perfect himself, but that he understands us. He spent time on earth walking among humanity. He had family, he had friends, he had relationships, he felt hunger, sorrow, pain, rejection. He saw the evil in humanity and the redeeming qualities of individuals. He understood what we are dealing with. He understood what the people of his day was dealing with, and he understands it now. Children and young people often reject advice and criticism from adults because they feel like that person doesn't understand. They feel like the person in authority that's giving them the advice or the criticism, whether it be good or bad, they don't know what they're going through. They don't understand their situation. Kids will say, but you don't understand. And if you're a mom or a parent or a teacher, you will hear that often. The mindset, that doesn't leave us as we grow up. Even today, in our world, we have different groups of people fighting different groups of people because they feel like they don't understand the struggles that they're going through. Jesus does understand. He is the only one who can be the role model for us because he experiences our struggles, the traumas that we walk through. He did it with bravery, he did it with humility, and he did it with compassion. He also has an invested interest in each and every person born. Even non-Christians or people that don't follow Christianity, throughout history, and even today, will admire Jesus for his compassion and the way he treated other people. Jesus models how we should live our lives. So how do we become more Christ-like? Because ultimately that's the goal. We as Christians, we don't strive to be perfect. We strive to be Christ-like. So what we do is we learn about Jesus. We read his words, the things that he said. We think deeply on them, and we remember them. We read we read the words of the men that knew him best. The disciples, the flawed men, the individuals that were around him, that knew him and knew about him and lived with him. They learned from Jesus. They knew what Jesus' passion was. And even though Jesus may have frustrated them sometimes, they knew what made him happy and they knew what made him cry. They learned how Jesus spent time. They learned how Jesus spent his time and who he spent it with. We can also ask Jesus to mold us, to mold our hearts and our minds, to be more like his, to recognize the things that we need to address, or the way we need to handle situations. We put his teachings into actions in our own lives. So what we learn from Jesus, we can do in our own lives and model in our own lives. If you were alive in the 90s or a child of the 90s, you heard the WWJD. What would Jesus do? It was on hats, bracelets, all kinds of things. T-shirts. Back in my day, it was a big thing, and everybody had something with that on it. But being Christ-like, it goes beyond what would Jesus do. This isn't just a question to ponder in the moment. This is being Christ-like. This is a mindset that should never be forgotten. It is how we live our lives, not just how we react to situations. Jesus humbled himself and washed the feet of the disciples. He didn't wait for someone else to do it. He did it to teach them that they should be servants to those around them. He wasn't just reacting to a situation, he was living as an example. So if we look at John 13:12-15, it says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on the clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. Hold on. Yeah. Do you understand what I did for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you. I set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Jesus is the example, and he's an example for mothers and for everyone. It is through Jesus that we get our worth. It is the price that he paid. In Jesus, we find our identity as unique individuals, worthy of love and worthy of salvation. No matter who else thinks or what others think about us, or whether anybody on earth finds us valuable or loved, it's through Jesus that we have that worth, that we have that value. Our goal is not perfection, but to be Christ-like. Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, reminds them what it is meant to be Christ-like. So it says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in the Spirit and one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others. In your relationship with one another, have the same mindset as Jesus Christ, who being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used as his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill the good purpose. Do everything without grumbling and arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life, and then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. It is easy to get wrapped up in what everybody else is doing. We are concerned with what others think of us. I know there's been a lot of times whenever, I've had to explain my actions for whatever reason, why I'm doing something or why I'm not doing something. Other people aren't just going to listen to what we do or what we say, but they're also watching what we do. Our children make this fact abundantly clear. If there is something you don't want others to hear or know, your children will shine a spotlight on it in public, always. So, just a word of advice. Other people aren't just listening to they aren't just listening, but they're watching. When we use Jesus as our example, it can seem weird to others around us, and that's okay. People thought Jesus was weird in his time too. Sometimes we get things right, and sometimes we mess up. It's good for all of us to remember that mothers, like everyone else, are flawed human beings in need of God's grace and forgiveness. Just like in the biblical accounts, some of us had great mothers. Some of us had mothers that weren't so great. Some of us didn't get time that we needed with our mothers. Some of us lost our mothers too soon. Some of us had mothers that did the best they could with what they had, and some of us are mothers doing the best we can in the moment. God offers us forgiveness when we ask. He shows us grace and mercy. It's a beautiful thing that we didn't deserve. I am so very grateful for that. I have made many mistakes in my life and did things that I shouldn't have done, just like everybody else. And I feel like God blessed me with my boys kind of as a way to keep me on the straight and narrow. On this Mother's Day, I want to remind everyone, God doesn't expect perfection. He knows we are broken people living in a broken world. That is why Jesus came and died for us. That's why he set the example for us. We are never promised a life free of pain, but Jesus does promise that he will be with us through it all. This is a hard world to grow up in. It's definitely a hard world to raise kids in. We don't have to do it alone, and we have Jesus, and we have our family in Christ. Jesus told us, John 16:33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world.